Lesson 2-6, multiplying integers. When multiplying two integers with different signs, the answer is always negative. So we have two examples here of 2 times -6. So you multiply the numbers like normal, so we get 12. And the answer is always negative if they have different signs. The 2 is positive, the 6 is negative, so our answer is negative. The next example is -3 times 12. Again, we multiply like normal, so 3 times 12 is 36. The 12 is positive, the 3 is negative, so our answer is negative. Pause the video to try these examples on your own. So we first have a -4 times 6. One number is negative, one number is positive, so we know our answer is negative, and then we multiply like normal. 6 times 4 is 24. 7 times -2. One's positive, one's negative, so our answer is negative. 7 times 2 is 14. Then we have 8 times -9. One is negative, one is positive, so we keep our negative, and our answer is 72. When multiplying integers with the same sign, the product of the two integers is always positive. So before, if they were different signs, the answer was negative. If they have the same sign, the answer is positive. So we have a -5 times a -11. We know our answer is positive because a negative times a negative equals a positive. So now we just have 11 times 5, which is 55. Then we have -4 times -3, which is a positive 12. And then we have -9 times -7, which is a positive 63. So let's just quickly review the rules for multiplication. So if we have a negative times a negative, it equals a positive. A positive times a positive equals a positive, because anytime they're the same sign, the answer is positive. But a negative times a positive is a negative. So if they're the same sign, the answer is positive. If they're a different sign, the answer is negative. So when we're multiplying integers, we can also multiply more than two integers at a time. There's two different ways that you can do this. You can use the associative property or the commutative property to find your answer. So we're going to start out with the associative property here. And if we're using that, remember that the associative property is grouping. So we're going to group these together first. So -4 times positive 12 is a -48. And then we still have our -5. And then if we continue through with that, then we get a positive 240. So now if we do the commutative property, we know that this has to do with the order in which you multiply numbers. So doing that, this is more of a mental math, because you can move the numbers around and do it kind of very quickly in your head. So if we were going to move these numbers around, it would probably be easiest to start with the -4 times the -5, which gives us a positive 20 times 12. And we should know that 12 times 2 is 24, and then you add the 0. So if you see here, we can use both properties and get the same answer. So if we take a look at the next example, we have -3 times -4 times -5. So if we use the associative property and group them, we first get -3 times -4, which is going to be a positive 12 times the -5. Negative times a positive is a negative. 12 times 5, 60. And if we use the commutative property, it's easiest to multiply the -4 times the -5, which we know gives us a positive 20. And then if we multiply that times -3, we get -60. Something else that we sometimes see is simplifying algebraic expressions. When you have an example like -7a times 4b, we're unable to combine terms because we don't have anything that's the same. But this is just a basic multiplication problem, because if you plugged in numbers for A and B, you would be able to tell me that you just multiply them straight across. So that's what we're going to do. So we have our negative 7 times A times 4 times B. We can use the commutative property and we can shuffle these numbers around and make them where we can multiply them and get something else. So if we rewrite this as negative 7 times 4 times A times B, we would have negative 7 times 4. It's going to be a negative 28, and we don't know our variables, so we can just leave them as A, B. So this would be your final answer. Pause the video to try a few examples below. The first example says to simplify negative 3 times 6y. So if we simplify that down, we can just multiply our numbers together. So we have negative 3 times 6. So our answer is going to be negative, and it's just a regular 18, and our y stays the same. For the next example, we have negative 9x times 3y. We know that we can use the commutative property to move these numbers around, so we can have negative 9 times a positive 3 times an x times a y. Negative 9 times 3 is 27, but it's negative because one's negative, one's positive, and then we can have the x and the y. Pause the video to complete this lesson review. Make sure you submit your notes and your lesson review for verification before continuing on to the classwork.